afternoon and welcome to Anders CPAs and Advisors for another edition of PPP with Paul and Dan. As you may already know, many clients, advisors, and banks have been patiently waiting for much needed clarification around this program. And we're closely watching for the changes and updates so that we can advise you and assist in the most efficient manner possible. Today, we're going to discuss a topic that's not real pleasant though, but it needs to be discussed: fraud. Really cheerful, but it's an important topic. I'd like to welcome Clay Kniepmann from our Forensic and Litigation area to discuss it a bit further. Clay?
Thanks, Paul, and thank you first for having me as a guest on the PPP with Paul and Dan show. Obviously, I'm not Dan, nor do I purport to have the PPP expertise of either you or Dan. My name is, as you mentioned, is Clay Kniepmann, and I'm in our Forensic and Litigation Services group. Along with being a CPA, I'm also certified in financial forensics by the AICPA, and I'm also a certified fraud examiner. So I've spent a good portion of my, in fact, the majority of my career working on fraud investigation matters. Things like this tend to interest me. While it's not always pleasant, these things can be interesting. We typically focus here at Anders more often on occupational fraud, so theft by an employee from a company. This is a little bit different. It's more likely to be investigated by a federal agency, FBI, IRS, Secret Service, Department of Justice. But there are a lot of, it's an interesting allegory for occupational fraud as well. So while I have been trying to follow along with all of the developments in the CARES Act, the stimulus package, and the PPP loans that you and Dan do such a great job covering, my interest was really piqued with these recent fraud cases.
Well, now that you've piqued our interest, why don't you just tell us about some of the instances that you've been following?
Yeah, so first, the first one I heard about was probably, I believe, back in July. And it was a case out of Miami where a man allegedly used PPP loan funds for a number of luxury items, spending money at Saks Fifth Avenue, luxury hotels, jewelry, and to top it off, a Lamborghini Huracan valued at nearly $320,000. Shortly after that, there was another case, this time out of Texas, that involved about 1.6 million in PPP loans that this time were used to buy a Lamborghini Urus, so a little bit different Lamborghini, also Rolex watch, real estate, and of course, visits to the strip clubs, I should say. So there was also a case that came out shortly after that out of California this time. So it's all over the country. In this case, the applicant allegedly used funds for stock trades and gambling in Las Vegas. So I don't know what it is, but these fraud cases, it's always Las Vegas or strip clubs, or I guess sometimes both. It wasn't long after that JP Morgan Chase didn't announce, but Reuters reported that JP Morgan Chase was investigating several of its employees who may have been involved with the misuse of funds, either helping people get these loans or using the funds themselves. So after that, I think that the investigation is still ongoing, and I expect we'll hear more about that in the near future. There's also former NFL receiver Josh Bellamy, who was allegedly one of 11 participants in a PPP loan scheme that totaled around 24 million. And just this weekend, I actually was doing a search and saw that there was another case where a man was charged for seeking $6 million in PPP loans for a series of companies named after Game of Thrones characters. So these cases kind of keep popping up, and we expect that will probably continue.
Well, I think the authorities have a pretty good handle on some of these, and as you said, I expect more to come. So what are some of the common threads? I mean, what should people be on the lookout for?
Sure. Yeah. And, we always talk about the fraud triangle in our fraud examiner world. I teach as an adjunct professor at Lindenwood University, and If you ask my students, they'll tell you we harp on this constantly, pretty much weekly. And the three elements of the fraud triangle are opportunity, motive and pressure, and then rationalization. So really, opportunity is the one that institutions can focus on, and that's the one that out of those that they can really have some control over. And in this case, we all know that Congress had to act quickly to get these PPP loans out to business owners that for much needed assistance, so people didn't lose their jobs, so that businesses could stay in business. And these were desperately needed loans, and then potentially forgivable. But because it was done at such a breakneck speed, it opened the opportunity for fraudsters to take advantage of a reduced level of scrutiny that loans would ordinarily be subject to. So it's also, if you think about it, it's also easier for a fraudster to perhaps rationalize that, hey, I'm just stealing money from the federal government. They'll just print more. You and I know as we sit here that these aren't victimless crimes. These have repercussions for all businesses. And again, these were funds that were supposed to be used for, businesses that really needed the money, not to buy a Lamborghini. So unfortunately, with this combination of factors, we did expect to see some instances of fraud, and I think we're starting to see those cases pop up now.
So, there were 5.2 million loans. It's not $5.2 million. That's actual number of loans, 5.2 million. So how bad is it? How bad could it be?
Yeah, it's really an astonishing number of loans if you think about it, and to get all those rolled out is no easy task. So the latest figures that I have seen were as of September 10th of 2020, and that's from the Department of Justice. And at that time, and this is still expanding, but it was just 57 people and around $175 million. So while that's a lot of money, 57 out of 5.2 million is a very small percentage. So, it's important to point out that most of these loans are still being used for their intended purpose and to keep people employed. Having said that, as we said, we do expect these cases to continue to come up and be on the rise. But, we also talk about, even as a business, there's no way to eliminate the risk of fraud entirely. Really, anytime that you do something, anytime that you transact in money, you have some risk of fraud. So the only way to eliminate all of your fraud risk is to not do anything. And we know that was just not an option in this case.
So what can borrowers and the general public do about this abuse if they happen to suspect something?
Yeah, so I guess a couple things. First, from the business owner perspective, another big problem with seeing cases of fraud on the rise is that this affects other business owners who might come under investigation, who are using the funds for perfectly legitimate purposes. So, we advise our clients and business owners to try to keep these funds as separate as possible. The loan funds, track them accurately and completely. Keep them separate as much as you can, and don't, deposit them into your own personal bank account or anything like that. The SBA has warned that depositing PPP loans into your personal account is considered to be a strong indicator of fraud. And so we don't want anybody to unwittingly put themselves under investigation and potentially have their bank account frozen, which would be a major problem for a business owner. And then from the general public perspective, every 2 years, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners comes out with a report called the Report to Nations, and they have percentages on, they have different figures and percentages for different aspects of fraud, one of which is how is fraud discovered. And every 2 years, without fail, the most common way that fraud's discovered are through tips and hotlines. And so wisely, the SBA has set up a way for people to report any instances of fraud, waste, or abuse on their website. And so if you think you may suspect, if your neighbor recently got a PPP loan and is now driving a Lamborghini, you might want to go to sba.gov and submit a complaint there. Also, if you just Google PPP loan fraud, it's the first thing that'll come up. So it's pretty easy to find. It allows you, if you'd like, to submit your tips anonymously as well. And after all, this is your tax dollars here, so everybody is interested in protecting those.
Sure. Well, thanks, Clay, and we hope to have you back at some point in time in the future with a little more cheerful topic. But the good news is that the large majority of recipients have and certainly intend to keep using these funds the right way. So we're confident that our banking partners are the best in the business, so they're doing the right thing. So I think we'll all sleep a little better. Join us next time for more up-to-date information, and thanks for joining us, and have a great day.
Thanks, Paul.